Geek Out!
Bleep Plop Bloop gamers. This week on the Video Game Archives, Zach joins me to talk about what was originally released in the United States, I suppose, as Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels. What was the released originally and in Japan as Super Mario Brothers 2. Just to, confuse everybody. So, and then of course we got the Super Mario Brothers 2 that we all know and love. But yeah, Zach, thanks for coming back on the show.
Great to be here again.
So let's go ahead and, I guess, just jump right in. This game initially came out in 1986. It's the last Mario game to come out before I was born, because it came out in June. But first Mario game not directed by Shigeru Miyamoto. He produces it, but it's directed by Takeshi Tezuka, who later goes on to direct like Super Mario Brothers 3 and stuff. But I didn't get to this game until like Super Mario Brothers All-Stars or Super Mario All-Stars on the Super Nintendo, like nearly a decade later.
Yeah, I think that's generally how most Americans can relate to it, because I mean, at the time you couldn't just find like a Japanese import of that game as accessible as you can now. So regarding Super Mario Brothers 2, which is Super Mario Brothers Lost Levels in the US, it was packaged as part of Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo and advertised as never before released. And it was a really big deal because even with the subtitle, The Lost Levels, you don't really know what the hell that means.
Yeah.
And it isn't until you actually play the game that's like, oh, hey, it's kind of like Super Mario Brothers, but not quite. And obviously that has its whole thing of just, it's barely different, but it's different enough to annoy you while playing it.
And I think a lot of that's by design, because apparently like Nintendo had found out a lot within a relatively short amount of time, because this game comes out, a year after the original Super Mario Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of players have already mastered and found all the secrets for the original game. So they're like, oh yeah? We're going to put out a game that's like kind of similar, where you're like, oh, this is more of the same, but different enough and hard enough, like intentionally to fuck with players.
Oh my god, yeah.
It's just to like frustrate them, to the point where Nintendo of America is like, this won't sell in the US because it's not fun.
And that's saying a lot, because at that time there were games that were known as Nintendo hard, quote unquote, where it was just purposely difficult, infuriatingly difficult, to the point where it forced replay value on the gamer. So to say that this game is way too hard for an American audience and it won't sell well, that's saying a lot, because there's been some like piss poor games on the Nintendo Entertainment System that were just ridiculously difficult. Yet this one was the one where they decided to make the call.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about all the NES, the controversial NES hard games. Certainly like Castlevania 3. Mega Man 1 is one of the hardest games. I remember Super C being really hard. I remember The Adventures of Bayou Billy being really difficult. But no, have you ever beat the Lost Levels?
No. I mean, yeah, I just get game overs, and then I just walk away from it, hit it up probably a year or two later, same thing. I think probably the farthest I've ever gotten was like World 6, maybe.
Mm-hmm. That's right, and there's the warps in this game kind of mess with you too.
Yes.
Like there's so much that Nintendo intentionally does to mess with the experts, quote unquote experts of this game.
Yeah, so regarding the warp zones, they send you back worlds too.
Yeah, they don't let you know that. There's
like
it's that there's poison mushrooms now. There's gusts of wind out of nowhere. There's just all these little things. It looks, if you didn't know any better and you saw Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels, just Super Mario Brothers 2, you'd just be like, oh, it's the first game. But there's just these little things, because graphically it doesn't look that much different than...
Yeah, very subtle.
Yeah.
You have like extra smiley faces on background objects.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, can you imagine the willpower of pissing off someone? Wait, okay, can you imagine the willpower to take away someone's progress in a game by sending them back worlds when they try to discover a warp zone?
I mean, it's
Like,
pretty. It's twisted. That is twisted.
it's twisted. Um,
The
not to mention,
yeah.
I was just going to say that, not to mention the traditional methods of finding warp zones. They knew that someone was going to go that route, and they said, "Oh, you're actually not going to advance as far as you thought you were."
Yeah, we're gonna send you back. Like there is a lot. Also, this is I think the first game where Luigi is not just a carbon copy of Mario.
That's right. Yeah, so you had your Mario start and your Luigi start, and each of them had different abilities depending on what you were trying to do in the game.
Well, Luigi, if I remember correctly, certainly from like that carried over to Super Mario Brothers 2, was that he could float a little, or he had a little more
He had a
airtime.
higher jump, but it was his controls were more slippery. It was hard for him to come to a complete stop.
Right. Whereas Mario was more about control, but didn't have the height.
Correct.
Yeah. So I mean, you get a lot of. Yeah, it's just such a weird game. Thinking about
Yes.
it,
Yeah.
it's certainly the one in Super Mario All Stars I played the least. I would always be like, "Oh yeah, that's there," like I'll dust it off every now and again. But there was never a big drive for me to beat all of the lost levels.
The even worse thing about Super Mario All Stars, that game being packaged into Super Mario All Stars, is that even though it's a remaster of the older games, the physics aren't entirely the same. So not only do you just have this game that's really frustrating, but then you also have these weird physics that makes it very difficult to do speed runs and the such, or just try to blitz through a level. And it's, oh my gosh. So I remember going back to the original version when it was released for the Wii console as a Japanese import, saying, "Hey, American audience, you could try like the OG Super Mario Brothers 2." And well, it was more approachable, and it was really interesting in seeing like the giant Super Mario Brothers 2 title screen that we never got. Yeah, still a ridiculously difficult game. And also, that poison mushroom isn't as obvious as in the Super Mario All Stars one, where it's, hey, it's purple and it has a skull on it.
With the Wii version of Super Mario All Stars, is it the original Lost Levels or is it the Super Mario All?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me clarify that because Super Mario All Stars, yeah, Super Mario All Stars was released for the Wii. Um, This was a virtual console download where you could download the Japanese import of Super Mario Brothers to Japan, Super Mario Bros. Lost Levels USA.
But no, I mean to that point, the anniversary edition of Super Mario All Stars on the Wii. What version of Lost Levels did it have?
It was pretty much an exact port of the Super Nintendo version.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if the Super Nintendo version was the only way you could play that weird 16-bit version of Lost Levels.
yeah, with all the portraits of Bowser in the background, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Was the does it come included on the NES Classic?
it does not.
It
Um,
doesn't.
that surprised me too. I guess probably same reason. Like
Yeah.
American audiences just aren't familiar with it. Even if they are, they would probably hate it.
But here's the thing, they include it on NES or they have levels on NES Remix that are derived from it.
Really?
They do, yeah. I forget if it's NES Remix Prime or NES Remix 2, but there is a bunch of Super Mario. There is basically every Super Mario game, including Lost Levels, on the NES gets some remix love in one of the two remix titles. I feel like it's probably Remix 2 now that I'm saying it out loud.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I blitzed through the Super Mario Brothers challenges on that, but I guess not.
Again,
Um,
it might be Remix 2.
but yeah, another. Let's just talk about all the things that they added to this game from the original Super Mario Brothers.
Hmm.
I guess for starters, you had bloopers in midair.
Yeah.
Was really weird, and they are still infuriating on the surface as they are underwater.
I mean, yeah, they still kind of just home in on you and just kind of drive you up the wall. Literally.
not to mention you had springs that just jumped you up a ridiculous amount. You would jump off screen, and you had no idea when you would come back down.
I mean, if you think about it, Super Mario Brothers 2 or Super Mario Brothers The Lost Levels really is a game designed just it's designed for experts to push them to the limits of their like technical platforming ability. In a way, it's almost like Super Mario Maker before Super Mario Maker.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely a nice way of looking at it. I think we're more prepared for the much more difficult levels now than we were back then.
Again, yeah, I can totally on the one hand, I would have loved to have gotten Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels as it was originally released, like on the NES, instead of having to wait a decade to get this weird version on the Super Nintendo, and then wait a decade after that to get it on the Wii in its
Exactly.
original version. At the same time, having played the Lost Levels for years and years now, that game, I mean, I'm not as harsh as Nintendo of America. There is fun to be had playing the Lost Levels, but it's like I don't go out of my way. I have to be in the right mood to play the Lost Levels, and I've never beaten it either. Um,
Yeah, it's if I really want to challenge myself and determine is this game beatable. You almost need a guide in order to play through this game because there are just things that you do not see coming that you could probably prepare for prior to starting the game. For instance, let's say if there is a level with an impossible jump, and this is the part where I get stuck at, where um, there's like a pipe that's suspended in the air and it's like just out of your reach. And maybe if I started with Luigi, I probably could have gotten there, or I could have known to take a warp zone, or like done some extra jumps and hurdles to find a warp zone that would get me past that, so I wouldn't have to deal with that nonsense.
yeah, and I just looked it up
Or
just to be sure. Lost Levels is in Remix 2, not Remix 1.
gotcha.
But yeah, no, you were saying about other things that kind of threw you off, like in terms that you would love to have a guide for.
Yeah, for instance, which warp pipes would take you underground to hopefully skip that portion?
Yeah.
Or is there an invisible block that I've just yet to find out after all these years?
How many different forms do you own this game?
I would have to say probably um, three. And that would be the Super Nintendo version, the Wii import, the Wii version of Super Mario All Stars, and then that's pretty much it as far as I know. But again, I find this game to be, looking back on it, it just feels like a bizarre ROM hack for the very sadistic developer that wants to challenge someone to their mental limit.
Yeah, I mean, it was also originally conceived as an arcade version of Super Mario Brothers, which makes sense because they wanted to get more coins. They wanted to get more money from gamers.
Yeah, exactly.
So it'll be interesting to see if because have they released the arcade component on the Nintendo Switch yet?
No, so far they've only released Mario Brothers, the
Yeah.
arcade version of that.
Right, right. Because it was originally part of the Verse system, which was something I don't think we really. Another thing we didn't really get here in the U.S. This idea of this kind of like linked arcade machine where you would, yeah. But it was
Super Mario Brothers Versus, it does have subtle differences to make it more difficult than the original.
apparently it was published for the disk system on the Famicom,
Wow.
and apparently it is the most popular game on the disk system. Like it sold over 2 million copies in Japan. So there was definitely a market for it. There probably just wasn't a market for it here.
Mhm.
I mean, let's be. I grew up with what was originally released in Japan as Doki Doki Panic, reskinned, and then as Super Mario Brothers 2, and then released in Japan as Super Mario Brothers USA. The that for me is Super Mario Brothers 2, just because that's the only game I knew as Super Mario Brothers 2 for almost like 3 decades now.
Yeah, it's weird trying to figure out which one I want to give the official title of Super Mario Brothers to. because yeah, the reskin Doki Doki Panic that we know here in the US, it's a completely different game, and it's aside from Shy Guys, not a whole lot has been brought over to later installments. Maybe throwing turnips and a couple of nods to that. But as far as the control scheme of that, they've never gone back to it, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
It's just slow and clunky, and that mechanic I think could be better suited for maybe an Ice Climbers game down the road. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we got a new Kid Icarus game. How come we haven't gotten a new Ice Climbers game in like 30 years?
Right? There's so many possibilities.
Yeah, they can't even show up in the latest Smash Brothers because of the 3DS limitations.
That still hurts.
It does. I thought it was like, why don't you just release them as a Wii U exclusive? Now a Switch exclusive. What's wrong with? Because the Ice Climbers were low key like one of the best like fighters in Melee and Brawl. So I was sad to see him go.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's not much more to really talk about with Lost Levels. It's tough as unless you got any stories or bits of history that you want to share with the kiddies, Zach.
Yeah, this game just frustrated me. It frustrated me when I was a kid. It frustrates me now, and I don't look back on it with any warm nostalgic memories. And I think even time itself kind of forgot this installment of the game. It doesn't resonate with a lot of people. Aside from the aside from the mechanics that have just been brought over from the previous installment. I mean, no one's going out of their way to do a speed run. I think if people did go out to set speed run records, no one would care to watch.
Yeah, they've already got Super Mario Maker.
Yeah,
for that.
exactly. They got Super Mario Maker if they want to challenge themselves to that level.
I think the big takeaway is Luigi isn't a carbon copy of Mario anymore. That's
Agreed.
That's probably
he's his own entity. You can choose him from the start menu, and he has different abilities from Mario that are still referenced to this day. Yeah. Otherwise, the game's just frustrating, and I don't really care to speak of it.
When was the last time that after this we don't see poison mushrooms until what, like Mario Party 2?
Gosh, yeah, that might be it. Because they certainly weren't in a mainline Mario game.
Did they show up in RPG? I'm trying to remember.
Goodness, I have no idea. My only memory is from a Mario Party game, and I think it slowed you down, like limited the number of dice you could roll.
Yeah, you could only roll up to the highest you could roll was the number 3.
Mm-hmm.
And if you landed in Mario Party 1, there was a special space where if you landed on it, if you got a regular mushroom, you got to re-roll. You got to roll again. If you got the poison mushroom, you were laid up for the entire next turn. I remember those, but that's really it. There's not a lot of. It's one of the most obscure Mario games, but at the same time, it's in a way it kind of leads to what we'll see as Mario Brothers 3. It certainly puts Tezuka in the director's chair, and which he maintains for the next couple big Mario games, not counting Super Mario Brothers 2 because that's the Doki Doki Panic team. But yeah, so
it's pretty much on the up and up after this.
Yeah. I think it's greatest hits after this. It's like hit after hit after hit after hit. This, it's a interesting point of curiosity. If you love Mario, certainly check it out. You can get it on the Wii U Virtual Console. You can get it on the 3DS eShop. But it exists. It's there.
Exactly. This is the sophomore slump of Mario.
Yeah. Let's make them harder just to mess with them. It's like, okay, well, thanks guys. But yeah, Zach, you got anything else to add before we put this one in the archives?
Yeah, honestly, let's just put it in the archives.
Fair enough.
That's pretty much how I think of this game if I were to describe it in one sentence.
There you have it. So we'll go ahead and shuttle it off, and it'll never be heard from again. And this has been another installment of the Video Game Archives. I'm Sam.
I'm Zach.
Keep playing. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.